Okay, everyone. Welcome to the Jitasa webinar series. Our webinar for today is dashboards. Is it a buzzword, or can my nonprofit actually use one? My name is Ron Kwok, and I'm with Jitasa. I'm the Director of Strategy and Marketing. I come with over a decade of business process consulting, marketing, business strategy experience across both the for-profit and nonprofit sector. And within Jitasa, I'm responsible for the development of our products and services, including the dashboard, which I'm going to present to you today and talk you through. And for those that don't know, Jitasa, what we do is we do finance and accounting exclusively for nonprofits, and I'll talk more about our services at the end. But a lot of our experience in coming from servicing hundreds of nonprofits across the country is we take the knowledge to put together a webinar series such as this as a way to really educate the nonprofit sector around best practices and thought leadership. So the agenda for today's lesson plan is fairly simple. We're going to start with, first of all, a quick discussion on the path to financial understanding and talk about how dashboards can really help you understand better the financials of your nonprofit, but also use it to make better decisions and to drive donor engagement. And then we're going to spend a good amount of time walking through and talking through the design of an effective dashboard. And the idea around that is if you have an effective dashboard, it can become more than a buzzword and become really useful within your organization. So we're going to talk you through the elements and actually show a demonstration of what a good dashboard is, utilizing those elements that we're going to talk about. And then we'll do a quick wrap-up. For those that want to know, I'm often asked, are we going to provide copies of the PowerPoint and a recording? We will do that, and so after the webinar, probably tomorrow or the day after, you should get a link to the recording and a link to the PowerPoint. So that should also prevent you from having to take copious notes. You can always go back, listen, reference the slides. So just really enjoy the presentation, the webinar, and just take in the information. And if you have any questions, feel free to mention it in the questions box. I'll be monitoring it as we go and answer questions along the way. Hopefully it can be more interactive that way as well. Okay. So let's talk about the first topic, the path to financial understanding. So at Jitasa, we often believe in the build, run, report approach in building solid foundations. Our philosophy is that if a nonprofit builds a best practice accounting foundation, which means the proper chart of accounts, the proper process, procedures, and the right foundation. And if you run things consistently, if you capture the proper transactions, the proper amount of detail, information you need for program tracking, grant tracking, and reporting, then what should happen is your reporting and your analytics should easily fall out of the process. So if you do step 1 and step 2, then you're going to have easy and accurate reporting. And really the purpose of reports, the purpose of your financials is twofold. The first one is to drive donor confidence. So confidence in the health of your organization, that you're up to date, accurately tracking things, and oftentimes I think healthy financials, the ability to report against your financials and programs, things like that, kind of designate the kind of the due diligence of your organization. But also to provide for you as a leader the information, the analytics you need to make better decisions. So, oftentimes we ask, why do we do this? It's not just for compliance. It's not just because our funders are asking for it, but it really can drive the growth of your organization through donor confidence and improved decision making. So to talk about that donor confidence piece a little bit, there's this great quote from Carolyn Lynch, who's the co-founder, president, and chairman of the Lynch Foundation. And she says 2 of the most important lessons she learned as a philanthropist is to first look very carefully at the financial numbers. And so before she or her foundations gets involved with any organization, it's important for them to understand where they stand financially, to have a good view of the numbers, and to see what that, and oftentimes that will connotate or tell a lot about the organization. So for her, the financials is the first thing she looks at before she can give. And it also drives for her confidence in the organization. Another great example of this is an article from the Chronicle of Philanthropy, where they interviewed a bunch of different grant makers and foundations and to look for the most common reasons why proposals are rejected. And the W.K. Kellogg Foundation said that 80% of all grant applications that come to them are immediately rejected. And one of the key reasons that was mentioned was poor financials. So for them, it's important for the financials and the proposed budget that's tied to the application to be right and realistic. And so oftentimes when a program staff does the work, details often get missed. And so it's important for the numbers to be accurate, but also to projections to make sense and to really reflect what they're trying to accomplish. We've talked to a lot of different grant makers, foundations, and one of the things they brought to us, our attention was, if applicants could just go and just capture not just the financials, but also some simple metrics such as the cost per impact, cost per output, or just cost of delivery and program, like that would differentiate them from a lot of the other applicants. And so we'll show you later how a good dashboard can actually help you do that very easily. So you can get to those numbers in a way and communicate it to your donors or to the grantors and the foundations to keep their confidence and to have them to invest or to fund your program on a continual basis. The second part of that path to financial understanding, or the second outcome you want to drive, is the ability to make better decisions. And so, within every nonprofit, within every organization, you have a mission statement, right? And so for ABC Nonprofit, their mission statement is on the lower right. And the goal for every nonprofit is to drive the organization to that mission statement and fulfill your mission and your vision for your organization and for your community. And it would be great if that was a straight line, if that journey was an easy path. But unfortunately, as we often know, it isn't. And most of the times, the path looks something like this, where you have a lot of turns, you have some stops, you start again, you go backwards sometimes, right? But you're always pushing forward to that mission statement. And as a leader, you're pushing your nonprofit in that direction. Now, it would be great if, as a leader, if you had a few indicators along the way to tell you what's not working. So when should you turn and shift directions, or even to the extreme when you should stop and go in a completely different direction. But also get indicators to show you what is working and when you should go full steam ahead towards that mission statement. The good news is, if you properly track transactions, if you do reporting, we do have a lot of information at our disposal. So not only do we have the typical standard revenue expense transactions you'll find with financials, but we also have program information and donor information. And most nonprofits track that to some degree, whether through an ERP, Excel, right, or through members of their organization. And oftentimes what most nonprofits do is we'll take that information and we'll produce financial snapshots through financial reports and financial statements, right? So we'll produce our statement of financial position or our balance sheet. We'll produce our statement of activities or income statement. We'll produce budget versus actuals and statement of functional expenses, right? And so we have these reports. We look at them on a monthly or quarterly basis. And what that does is that provides for us a financial snapshot of where we stand in that point in time, along with some historical information. And we think that that's really good for what's called level 1 organizational planning, is that gives you good insights, it gives you good indicators, and it does help you make decisions for your organization. But there's also a second set of data. That you should be able to see as well. I just want to pause. I got a question from Tony asking if you should be seeing a different slide. On my audience view, I see that we're looking at slide, the property slide. Can you just confirm with others that you're seeing other slides, not just the first slide? Hopefully it's just, it's not a widespread issue. And Tony, if you're still having an issue, just maybe a refresh on your browser that you need to kind of work with. But I just want to confirm from others that you're able to see it okay before I continue. So I'm assuming no other comments. I think we're good. So, when it comes to this kind of level 1 planning, like these financial snapshots, these statements, are good, and they're great for you within the organization and doing for planning purposes. But there's also a second level information that's also valuable for your nonprofit. And in this vein of trying to figure out what is working, what is not working, right, it would be great if you can use those numbers and bring life to the numbers. And I'm a big believer that numbers tell a story. And your financials, your program, your donor data, it tells a story. And it tells a story of what's going on within your organization. And it would be great if we can take these numbers, find the story, and use the numbers as a guide to help you as a leader identify next steps. So, to look at the revenue numbers, to look at the expense numbers, to look at the program donor information, and use that to find out what is working and what's the story behind the numbers to show you what's working and where you should continue and push forward, but also alert you to what's not working and when you should pivot and stop. And the good news is, if you take the data we have and if you look at it a little bit differently, so beyond just the financial reports, but you look at it in terms of benchmarks, if you look at it in terms of trending, you build projections, then when you take that different type of data and cut it a different way, I believe that provides for you what's called level 2 organizational planning and a deeper level of insights so you can make better planning for your organization going forward. And that's really what a dashboard is about. A dashboard allows you to really find the story behind the numbers and to cut and look at the numbers in a different way that bring life to the numbers and also allows us as nonprofit leaders to make better decisions. And so there's this article from Forbes that came out last year where they were talking about this kind of push for dashboards. And they had an article called Executive Dashboards, What They Are and Why Every Business Needs One. And I took the liberty to call it Why Every Nonprofit Needs One, because I think it's just as applicable for a nonprofit versus for a business. And what they laid out were the following benefits of a dashboard. They talk about how a dashboard brings you visibility and measurement. Peter Drucker said, you can't improve what you can't measure. So if it's not visible and it's not being measured, you're not going to improve that metric. It also brings accountability, the concept that people play differently when you keep score versus when you don't. A dashboard allows you to track performance versus your plan. So we all have a strategic plan. We all have a mission and a vision. That's only the first step. But it's about executing that plan and then knowing if you're on path or off path in the execution is an important value that a dashboard brings to your nonprofit and to your organization. And then lastly, a good dashboard provides ease of access and time savings. And I think this is a key point because oftentimes in the past, like I've done this through Excel models, Excel worksheets, and they're great, but they're a bear and a pain to build. And so what happens is I would have spent 10, 15, 20 hours to get the model right and updated, and then I could look at the data. But if it was easier to update, and it could be accessed more regularly, and it could be accessed via web, then not only I, but also other leaders in the organization can also use it, and use it more frequently, and use it more often. So if you kind of keep these benefits in mind, I think it's kind of a good thing to keep in mind as we go forward, and then we'll start talking about, what a good dashboard looks like, incorporating some of these elements. Okay. And so to wrap up this section, the takeaway is that investing in your finance and accounting infrastructure and building a good dashboard, we believe will help every nonprofit achieve its mission because it's going to improve donor confidence, which will result in more funding, but it'll also allow nonprofits to make data-backed decisions and make better use of their resources to grow the organization. Okay. So if there's no other questions, let's kind of talk about the meat of the webinar and really talk about what does an effective dashboard design look like. And so what we'll do is we'll cover 4 elements, 4 benefits, and then demo them through our dashboard and help it come to life. Okay. So the 4 elements of an effective dashboard are the following. The first one is around, it needs to be simple and high level, right? So you want to make it too complicated. You don't want to have too many numbers. But the idea is if you keep it simple and high level, what's going to happen is you'll be able to demystify and simplify numbers for you, for your senior staff, and then also for your board, right? I often believe a picture says 1,000 words. So that's kind of the concept we're going to talk about there. Secondly, an effective dashboard is dynamic and interactive. And so if it's beyond just a static picture, but you can actually dive into the numbers, change timelines and time frames, that allows you to find out the story behind the numbers and discover, why is income trending in a positive direction for the last 3 months? What can we do to continue that activity in that way? The third element is the dashboard should be relevant to your mission and goals, right? So every nonprofit, again, we have a plan, we have a path forward. And so if you can communicate those goals and track progress through those goals, then you as a leader can drive your organization in progressing and achieving those goals. And lastly, as I mentioned before in the prior example with Forbes, an effective dashboard needs to be easy to update and access. Because if it's easy to update and access, then you're going to use it regularly to stay top of mind. And so then it's going to become a big part of your culture, the decision-making process for your nonprofit. So let's talk about that first element, keeping it simple and high level. And really the concept here is pretty straightforward. The goal is to demystify and simplify the numbers, right? And again, this is for your board, for your leaders, for those in your organization. And it starts with the concept that, a picture says 1,000 words. So let's use pictures that say 1,000 words instead of a table with 1,000 words, right? So we're often guilty of putting on large financial reports with a lot of numbers that are an eyesore, and it's hard to figure out what's going on. So let's use charts, pictures, and graphs instead of those tables. At the same time, when you build a dashboard, keep it simple so it's not to overwhelm nonprofits. We learned that lesson in the development of our dashboard. We had different prototypes and different versions, and we had too much on one page, and we learned to keep it simple and to streamline it, and not to provide too much information for our clients. But then at the same time, provide the ability to deep dive for a power user, right? So you want simplicity, but then also the ability to dive into the numbers and to find out what's happening behind the scenes and what story is taking place and what you can learn from that story and from those numbers. And you'll see that in the second piece on how we're able to do that. Okay. And the reason why you want to keep it simple and high level is you want your discussions, whether it's with your board, your senior staff, when you present numbers, you want it to be interactive and engaged. You want people to understand what's going on. You want this and not this, right? So you don't want someone to fall asleep because it's table after table after table, but really it's about the story and what's taking place and how you can respond as a nonprofit. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend some time actually walking through, and I'm going to demo some of our dashboard elements. And again, but do it in a way where we're highlighting some of the elements we talked about just now. So I'm going to go to our dashboard. And the dashboard we have is available via the web. So it is easy to access, like I mentioned earlier. And so this is kind of the home page for our dashboard. And there's a few different elements here, right? And so there's a place where you can see your financial activities or your income statement. If you have a budget versus actuals, you can track that. You can see your financial position or balance sheet. And then we have some custom areas that are dependent by some nonprofits. We also have functional expenses, which is spending by class. And then we have more of the custom areas that are spending by location, trend information, program information. So the idea is through this dashboard, we're able to bring together your financials, your program information, and then even funding information if you want that as a nonprofit, but it's all available in one place, and it pulls from different systems, whether it's your accounting system, your donor management system, or your program tracking system, right? And so let's start with the first example, and let's go into our financial activities or your income statement. And again, with that in mind, keeping it simple and at a high level, and let's see what that picture can look like. So give me 1 second. Let me just, I think I have some technical difficulties. Let me just reboot my internet browser really quick, and I'll go from there. Apologies. Let's see if that's better. Okay, great. So when you go into the financial activities like you see here, the first thing we have is, instead of your typical standard numbers and tables, we have pictures and graphs. And so on this dashboard, you'll see in the top area a snapshot of your financial activities or your income statement for that period in time. So here I picked a trailing 12 months, and this will show me my income. If the nonprofit has costs, it shows the cost snapshot, expenses, and then your net income, change in net assets for that time period. And so that's a snapshot of where you stand for that period. And then I think this picture is a very useful picture right below, where we have the trends in your net income and those different elements. So you can see over each month for the last 12 months what's taking place. The green is your income, the red is your expenses, and the yellow is your net income. And so you can see where there's fluctuations and where there's changes, and obviously where the green peaks above the red for that period, you have positive net income in that time period. When the red is above the green, like in this area, your net income is negative for that time period, right? So, what this shows you is really kind of a quick snapshot of the trends of your income statement, your financial activities for that time period, and really shows you like what's happening with your organization over that same time period. And then on the right, you have a breakdown of key categories for your income and expenses. So for this nonprofit, their key accounts are direct contributions, non-government grants, government grants, program sales, investment, and other sources. But as you can see here, you can see how each one fluctuates over time. But that tells you the useful story of saying, okay, for my revenue and income, like what has been the big drivers for the change? And obviously for this nonprofit, it's direct contributions. And you can see from this picture, when you compare it here, that as direct contributions flow up and down, their overall income flows with it. And there's other drivers as well, but that is the biggest driver. And you'll see later on, you can actually dive in and to find out what's taking place within that category, which we'll talk about in another example. At the same time, we have expense trends right below. And so now you see what's taking place on the red in the picture on the left, and you see how salaries, contract services, non-personnel, facilities, travel and meetings, direct program assistance, and other expenses is driving the expense trends. And you can see here that salaries and related are a pretty significant piece of the expense, but there's relatively little fluctuation in that. They probably have pretty consistent staffing across the time period, but most of the fluctuation comes from direct program assistance. So again, it kind of gives you a quick eye as to what's taking place. And then the next step, which we'll talk about again later, is diving into that example and finding out, okay, what is driving those fluctuations in the direct program assistance? But the idea, again, is that by looking at a picture like this, sometimes this picture will tell a lot more than just what you would get from a financial table or a snapshot. But if you do want to find and look at the actual financials through this dashboard, you can, and you can actually go to the financial statements for any period of time and look at the actual financials for that time period and drill down. So this dashboard gives you a combination of both, where you have a picture, but you also have your standard financial tables that you may be used to provide more details as appropriate. Okay, so that's again kind of one example of what it means to keep it simple and to keep it at a high level. Another example is if we go to the financial position or the balance sheet, this is a different way to look, at a balance sheet. So again, to go beyond just a financial table, but let's look at pictures to kind of tell the story and to give you a high-level view of what's taking place. So like we had before, at the very top, we have the kind of point in time, the cash balance, the accounts receivable, other current assets, fixed assets, and other assets for this current as of February 2014. Right? So you have the numbers. Right below it, you can see what percent of their assets is cash, which is 61%, versus AR, 14%, versus other assets at 19%, and the others. But now you can quickly see through a picture and a graph like what that makeup looks like and how much of it is cash, which is always preferred, versus other things. And then right below, you have the same kind of trend picture we had before for the income statement, only this time it gives you the asset trend. So this will tell you your total assets for April when you add up the cash, receivables, other current, fixed, and other assets. And you can see by the color what it is for each one. But then also, the black line shows you the movement of cash. And whether you're a small business or a nonprofit, they always say cash is king. So it's always important to know what your cash balance is and how that's been moving over time. And then on the right-hand side, I think this is a very useful picture where you can see, like, you know, what has been the movement for different points in time by each of the key parts of the balance sheet or financial position. So you have here cash, accounts receivables, other current assets, fixed assets, and other assets. And depending by the line, this tells you from year to date, February 14th, how much has each one moved. So cash has dropped a good amount from year to date. It's actually dropped by 30%, and that's designated by the long line, and it's a red arrow because it's going in probably in a direction you may not want it to go as a nonprofit. But then you can also see the movement for the other ones. And so this kind of tells you like what movement has been taking place and to what degree. And again, it's a very simple way to give you that picture. Okay? And so we'll come back to some of the other elements in a little bit. But I wanted to kind of show an example of what it means to keep things at a high level, to simplify the numbers, and to allow that to begin to tell the story versus showing the typical kind of tables and charts or tables and reports that many of us are used to when we look at financials. So if you go to design element 2, the second element, so once you've simplified and demystified the numbers, then it's about discovering and telling the story behind the numbers, right? So again, up front in the intro, we talked about how every number has a story, right? And it's a story of what's taking place in your organization, whether it's programs, revenue, expense, change in net assets, right? And so the trick as a leader is to find out what story is being told by your numbers, and then how do you communicate that story to key stakeholders. And so what's interesting about this is that, you know, if you think about it, nonprofits by nature, like we're master storytellers, right? And because of what we do in terms of fundraising, driving volunteer engagement, like we realize that we have to be master storytellers. We have to tell the story of our organization. We have to tell our mission and say it in a way that resonates with our stakeholders so they get engaged and want to be a part of our nonprofit and our mission and our organization. So to thrive and to grow, we have to be great storytellers. And McKinsey Quarterly called this out in an article back in 2011 where they talked about how nonprofits have really mastered the art of storytelling. And there's a lot they can teach us, or they can teach the private sector in this area. And so it's interesting, if we're such good storytellers, you know, why don't we take the same approach with our financials? So if we can tell a good story around our mission, if we can tell a good story to engage a donor, why is it often that when we come to our financials, what we often do is we present a large table of information, large graphs, right, and present it that way to our board, present it that way to our donors, instead of telling a story behind the numbers, to talk about, you know, what is taking place, like why is revenue, why has it been increasing at a 30% clip over the last year, and what we can do to continue that journey. Well, why don't we talk about, let's find out why expenses have been fluctuating and the story behind it and what we can do as leaders to make that more steady and more, so we can project it better and plan better, right? So a quick best practice tip is, when you talk to a board, when you talk to a donor, is not to present an Excel spreadsheet, not to download your report from QuickBooks Online, but instead, tell the story behind the numbers. So summarize key numbers and use charts and graphs to explain the behavior, and then put detailed financials in the appendix, right? So again, I believe that if you have graphs and you have charts, that can allow you to investigate and find the story, and then also communicate that story as well. And so this is the second way that an effective dashboard can help you do this, because I believe that a dynamic and interactive dashboard enables you as a leader to discover and tell the story. So a good dashboard provides you the ability to drill down for more details, the ability to change time frames to compare different points in time, and the ability to hover or find additional key details to match that picture or find out the number behind a picture. And so when you combine all these different elements, then you can become an investigator and find out what's taking place, what's the story behind the numbers, and how you need to respond as a leader based on what you're finding out from the numbers. So let's go back to our dashboard and let's see what this looks like through a real-life case or example. Okay. And so the example I want to show is, let's go back to our dashboard and let's go back to our financial activities tab. Okay. And if you remember the picture we had before, you'll notice a few things, right? You'll notice that, back in this picture, there's a lot of movement going on in their net income area. And like I mentioned before, a good dashboard is interactive. So one thing you may want to do is you may want to look at different points in time. So instead of the 24 months, the 12 months, you may want to look at 24 months. So you can do that, and now you can see the peaks and valleys over 2 years versus 1. And then you'll notice, for example, that there's the same spike in November, December, January as there was this year, as there was last year. I mean, the spike was larger this year on the revenue side, but there was the same spike last year. So there's obviously something going on there. So that gives you a point of comparison to say, well, let's look at those 2 quarters and find out what common activities have taken place to drive that. So the ability to change time frames is important. You always want to be able to hover for details. So a picture will show you kind of where things are going, but through this dashboard, if you hover over any point in time, like for December, you'll see that it can tell you the actual revenue and the expense for that time period, along with the change over that same time period. Right? So again, that starts telling you some of the numbers behind the picture, and it allows you to kind of look to where to go. And then you also want the ability to drill down, right? So if you go to your financial snapshot and actually look at the financial statement, you can go to any point in time and say, all right, so I know what my direct contributions look like in summary, but I would love to go into a sub-account and find out more information. And so now you can expand it and look at all of the key sub-accounts for direct contributions and look at the balances or the numbers for direct contributions, individual board contributions, corporate, church, etc. Right? So again, that kind of shows an example of how the ability to drill down, hover, change time frames can be really useful. So let's kind of put this in motion and see what kind of information can we gather as an investigator if we're going to go and find the story behind the numbers. So let's go back to the income statement. And let's look at the trailing 12 months like we had before. Okay. And so here we find that, again, there's a spike in December on the revenue and the expense. So a natural question you may have is, okay, so what is driving that spike? What has been kind of the driver for that? And let's see what the numbers tell us. So if you go back on the right-hand picture, you'll see direct contributions again move, lock in step with the overall picture. And if you look here, you'll see that this spike happened in direct contributions, also happened in December. So it lines up well with the picture on the left. So now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to find out what part of the direct contributions is driving that increase in revenue, and what can we do about that to either replicate it or find out more. So let's go to our financial snapshot. Let's change the time period of that financial to only show December. And when you do that, you'll see the direct contribution line. We had an actual of 275 versus a budget of 204. And it was 275 or 408. So like we noticed before, that was a big driver. So now let's go into direct contributions in more detail and find out what has been driving those numbers. And you'll see that when you look at the sub-accounts, the big driver has been the individual board contributions and the corporate contributions. And so those numbers made a large part of that total number. And so now what you have as a leader is you can find out and go back to your staff and say, okay, it looks like we had some really good activity around corporate contributions. You know, I want to meet with my fundraiser and talk about what kind of corporate contributions do we have for that period. And then was that a one-time thing? Can we replicate it? And let's find out the story behind what made that so effective. Because we only had a budget of $1,200, but we brought in a lot more. At the same time, on the board or individual side, is to find out what activities took place in December around that area. And you may discover that, you know, it was a large board drive that we had, right, or board donation drive. Or it may be a social media, web marketing, fundraising event we had to drive individual contributions, right? So again, the idea is that your financials are telling you where to look at and where to ask the questions, and then go back to your fundraising team and find out what took place in the area of individual contributions in the month of December, right? And was that a one-time deal? Was that an annual occurrence? And then what can we do as a nonprofit to continue those activities to drive that? So while the number's not going to tell you exactly like what happened, it does tell you where to look and what questions to ask if you have the right tools to make that an easy process. Right? So that's kind of a quick example, but hopefully you start to get the idea of how you can use a dashboard and the ability to drill down, change time frames, things like that, to research and to make decisions as a leader within your nonprofit. Okay. So let's now let's go back to our presentation, and what we're going to do is we're going to continue on our discussion. Give me 1 second. Right. Okay. And so we're going to talk about design element number 3. And we're going to talk about how you can drive progress towards your organizational goals. And so the concept here is that you can improve what you can measure. Actually, I noticed that the audience view has paused, so I'm not sure if there's some technical difficulties. So I'm going to, I'll keep on talking, but hopefully you'll start to catch up and you'll see kind of what we're talking about. But the idea is that you can improve what you can't measure, right? And so in driving progress towards organizational goals, if you don't measure something, you're not going to be able to drive improvement within your organization. There's also the concept that people play differently when you keep score, right? So this goes back to the 2 points that were brought up during the Forbes article, that people play differently when you keep score, and you have to measure something to drive improvement. And if you don't believe this concept that people play differently when you keep score, I think a great analogy is something I've heard, I think, through the Gallup organization. they also believe this methodology. They believe in dashboards and using them for your nonprofit or your organization. And to kind of make this analogy come to life, they always talk about a basketball game or a pickup game, right? So if you go to any court, playground, and you watch kids play, or if you play sports, you notice that the intensity level, the body language and the tone is very different when people are just standing around and shooting around and just shooting baskets and having fun versus when somebody says, hey, let's form 2 teams and let's play a game. Because once you do that, then all of a sudden everyone's jumping around. They're trying to get every rebound. They're hustling. They're checking each other, all those things, right? So once we start to keep score on a playground around something as simple as basketball, you'll notice that people play differently. The intensity picks up. The accountability picks up, and so forth. And so it's the same thing when it comes to your organization and when it comes to driving progress towards your goals, right? So if you have a plan and if you have desired outcomes, but if we're not keeping score and progress and communicating that progress to our organization, then people are going to act differently. So a well-designed dashboard enables you to drive progress towards your goals by, first of all, allowing you to establish goals and baselines and target lines within the dashboard and making it obvious that this is what you're striving for. It also allows you to easily track, view, and communicate progress against that target number. And then, like I showed you before, it also allows you to investigate and identify why you are making progress or why you're not. And it's important when you're looking at the goals to actually go beyond just the financials. But a good dashboard allows you to bring together your financials, your funding, and your field information to make it holistic and comprehensive, right? So through your dashboard, you should be able to set your goal, show your progress to the goal, and then investigate and find out why or why not you're hitting those goals. So let's go back to the dashboard example, and I want to show you what this looks like. All right. So the first example I want to talk about is your budget versus actual, right? So every nonprofit, or most nonprofits will go through a budget exercise once a year where you'll set your organizational budget. And if you have a dashboard, it allows you to easily view progress or how you're tracking against your budget and looking at your actuals. And again, if you have a dashboard, you can pull this from your financial or your accounting system, and these pictures will be created fairly quickly for you. Okay. So this is your budget versus actuals, and like we had before, there's some very simple pictures to look at. You want to see this is a view of your income. You can always change from income to expenses to net income through the drop-down list, right? But right here, you see kind of an indicator of where you are for year-to-date. And so you can see right here that they are $108,000 over budget when it comes to income. So they had a budget of $1.6 million or 1.7, and they're at 1.8. And then down below, you'll see that where they were month to month. So the gray is kind of their budgeted number, and the green is their actual number. And so where the green peaks above the gray, they were above budget for that month. Where the gray peaks above the green, they were below budget for that month. But you can see here that obviously they had a lot more months where they're above budget versus under budget, and which contributes to them being $100,000 over budget. And so it was a good steady march for the organization. I mean, they had a really great month in December and January, but overall they either stayed at budget or they were above, and so things were looking really good. At the same time, on the right-hand side, it's always important, I think, to know, like within each income category, what is above or below budget, and same thing with your expenses. So this picture below, this picture to the right, gives you a quick indicator of that. So you can see that other sources were $120,000 over budget. Government grants was $50,000 over budget. But non-government grants was about $70,000 on the budget. So there's opportunity for improvement in that area. And so this is a good indicator to find out, okay, so what's taking place in the non-government grants? Like, why is it pulling its weight? And find out, and talking to the manager of those grants, or the one responsible for those grants, applying for those grants, like what is happening in that area. And same thing with on the expense side. If you change this picture from income to expenses, you'll find that on the expense side, they were over budget. So they had a budget of 1.6 with actual 1.8. They were pretty good for most part except for December. And so now let's look at here and find out, what areas were they over budget. So direct program assistance was way over budget, 100,000. Salaries was 40,000 over budget. And everything else was slightly over, but the big movers were those two. So like we had before, now you can go in to your actual income statement, go to the financial snapshots, drill down, and look at which of those different subcategories is driving that variance from what you had in mind, right? So that's kind of one simple example of how setting your target for your budget, but also the ability to easily track it and view it is important, because now that it's easily viewable, you can always have a conversation once a quarter, once a month with your staff and your board, and to dive into those numbers and show a picture, get it on the same page, but also find out what's taking place behind the scenes. Another example of setting a target is your functional expenses. In this area, we call it spending by class. So this metric here is an important metric for many nonprofits to capture and to track. It's like what percent of your expenses or expenditures is going to programs versus administration versus fundraising. So you have your snapshot up here. You can see here for the nonprofit that 68% of their expenses have gone to programs, or 60% of their spending. You see the trending over time. But more importantly, on the lower right-hand side is this idea of setting a target, right? So this nonprofit has set the target of a program spend goal of 75%. So they want to get to 75% of program spend, or 75% of expenditures go to program spend. And so here you can see how that has moved over each month. And they're currently at 68.2. So they're below. But you can see exactly they're kind of teetering on that line. But it shows everybody are they hitting that goal and where are they missing that goal. And so this is a cumulative view. You can also look at the monthly view. And that's interesting because I think that will show you, if you look at that picture, that there has been month to month where they've been over, but there is sometimes where they've been way below. So again, the question is what's taking place, what's going on, and what can they do to make that number more consistent to the goal that they're striving towards. Okay. And the last example I want to show you on this one is program goals, right? So we spent a lot of time on financials, but with this dashboard, you can also bring in funding information and program information. And so this nonprofit, ABC nonprofit, wants to track their program goals. And so, and if the interface is built, it can easily pull that from that system or that database or the Excel spreadsheet. And so this nonprofit wants to track beneficiaries in the areas of hygiene, sanitation, and water. They have the actual numbers, but they also have projected numbers. And so it's early in the year for 2014, so they're 30% of their target, or 13%, but there's a good amount of time to go. And then below you can see that they have a goal of 16.07. Their projected is, one second. Their projected was much higher. One second, I think I clicked on a button. But you can see, what is taking place and what do those numbers look like. So you can actually track your progress against those different areas. On the right-hand side, there's an output section where they want to track the output they want to drive for each of the areas. So systems. It can pull from different funding systems or donor management or program information systems. It can also work off of Excel data as well. A good dashboard is also able to update data minutes versus hours. So you just have a feed that's live to the system, or if you need to download via CSV, Excel, and upload, that should only take a minute. And what's nice about it is you start adding historical data. So every month you're adding a new data set, but that allows you to look at a longer period of time and compare historical information as well. What's nice about using a dashboard versus Excel is that design changes can take hours versus days, right? So I've done the process before. We had this dashboard where it was modeling by Excel. And so, I have to go and get a new data set, bring it together, manipulate the data, and that may take 5 hours. And then if I wanted to go and look at a different picture, look at a graph, that may have taken another 1, 2, or 3 hours. Because there's pivot tables, there's references, all these different things. Like the solution that we use make it really easy. So our financial analysts will meet with our clients and have a conversation about what our client wants to look at, what the CFO wants to look at. But then the design change can be done in a few minutes. So the client's paying for the consult and the change and not for the work behind the scenes to make that happen, because that's done very quickly. And then lastly, a great dashboard is accessible anywhere via a web, phone, or tablet, right? So you should be able to access it on your computer, on your iPhone, your iPad, Galaxy, etc., and it can be kind of wherever you need to versus an Excel file that is only on your computer. And so that way your board can access it. You can have it on your company portal, your nonprofit portal, things like that, right? So that wraps up our section on the design of an effective dashboard. I want to wrap up now and share a little bit about Jitasa, what we do, but also about our services and the financial tools offering, if you're interested. So really quickly, for those that don't know, Jitasa, our passion is finance and accounting for nonprofits, right? So we have a love for numbers. Finance and accounting is what we're passionate about, but we also have a spirit of serving others, and that's what Jitasa means. And it really captures the essence of our nonprofit clients, but also the partnership we have with our nonprofit clients in serving their constituents and their community. We are the first and largest finance and accounting services provider, and we're exclusive to the nonprofit sector, currently serving hundreds of nonprofits across the country, from federation to startups in every sector. And so there's very few things we come across with a client that we haven't serviced or dealt with another client. So it brings a lot of best practices and expertise to the table. At the same time, we're also more than just a bookkeeping or accounting firm. We are a full services finance and accounting provider for nonprofits at any stage. So whether your nonprofit is a do-it-yourselfer, whether your nonprofit wants to focus on what you do best and outsource their accounting, whether you're just getting started, building up your organization, or taking it to the next level, we have services for every nonprofit. So for those that are just getting started, we have an IRS Form 1023 support to guide them through the process of applying for the 501c3. If your nonprofit has an in-house bookkeeper or accountant and they're just looking for a nonprofit accounting best practice support, we have a very affordable support center that they can call to give them guidance and support. If they want to do managed services and have us take over the finance and accounting, we have bookkeeping and accounting services where we take on the entire function for our clients. And at the same time, we also have advanced financial tools for nonprofits that are looking to take their financials to the next level through dashboards, through financial consults, things we just talked about. And so that's the last thing I want to highlight is this idea of what we have is called a board engagement package. And so that's one of the elements of our nonprofit financial tools. And so through this board engagement package, we're able to put together a financial dashboard custom to your nonprofit. We can even help you prepare the board presentations for your board members. And this is all done via not only the dashboard, but you're also assigned a designated Jitasa financial analyst that acts as your kind of financial analyst within your organization. So whether you're an ED or a CFO, this financial analyst will have personal consults with you like once or twice a month to understand, what are the key metrics you want to look at, what are some key analysis, like how is the dashboard working, how did the board presentation go, and what elements and changes do you want to make to the dashboard for your nonprofit, right? So the idea is you have somebody now that can quickly and easily comb data, manipulate data, analyze data, and then prepare a dashboard that you can access and use to investigate and find out what's going on within your nonprofit. They can even go and actually do the preliminary analysis and meet with you about what they found through the dashboard. And so this is kind of the first package we have in the nonprofit financial tools. We also have tools around financial planning, funding engagement, donor engagement. But this board engagement package, which is built around like a dashboard like you saw, we have two affordable options. We have a quarterly package option where you can get 4 updates a year or once a quarter. And that would be $90 to $115 a month, where you get the consult, the dashboard, and the board presentation done for you on a quarterly basis. If you want it done on a monthly basis, that would be $250 or $300 a month because you're doing it once a month versus once a quarter. So if you're interested, I'll be sending out an email with information around the recording and a PowerPoint. If you want, please reply back to the email and ask for a free consult, and I'd be more than happy to set up time with our Jitasa financial analyst to talk about your organization and if these dashboards can be useful for you and how to move forward with that. Okay. And lastly, we have a bunch of free educational resources. You may have found this from social media, from our Jitasa University site, but we have a section of our website called Jitasa University, and we have a lot of webinars available on a monthly basis. So whether it's presenting to your board, creating a budget, 5 steps to smooth year end, grant tracking, or accounting 101, like feel free to register for these webinars. They're free for the nonprofit community. And then also we have some basic information around like what to know, best practice documents, things like that, that are available for free. We also have a more detailed version available through our support center as well. Okay. So if there's no further questions, I'm going to wrap up. I haven't seen any pop up during the webinar. So hopefully we're good. If you're interested, you can always email me. I forgot to put my contact information here, but it's ron.kwak, so ron.kwak @jitasa, jitasa.is. You can always email me that way, and also I'll send you a recording and a link, and you can always reply back to that, and we can communicate that way as well. Okay? So thank you for your time, and hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.